soulmates, you're welcome to my channel. My name is Tekla, and in today's tutorial we are going to do the sewing tutorial of this stylish blouse that has been trending for a while now. So if this is your first time coming to my channel, please go ahead now and hit the subscribe button, and remember to turn on your notification bells so you'll be the first to know when I upload new tutorials. And if this looks like something that you really like to learn, then stay tuned and let's get to class. So I would also like to say that this is the sewing tutorial from the pattern drafting that we have already done. The pattern drafting is just right before this video, so if you have not seen that, please go ahead now and check out the pattern drafting before you follow up with this. But if you have already seen that, please let's continue with the tutorial. So at this point, I'm just going to show you how I was able to cut this on my fabric. So on the side part of my pattern, I added 1 inch allowance, but please use 1.5 so that you do not have any issues. And on the down part as well, remember to add 1 inch on the hem part of your pattern drafting. So remember that the pattern drafting that we didn't really add any allowance to that. Then for the center part of the top, I am now going to add 1/2 inch allowance all round. The only place I'm going to add 1 inch is at the bottom part, but every other part is just 1/2 inch. So when you are sewing on your own, please remember to add 1/2 inch or any allowance that you are able to work with. So I'm just going to cut out my front, and then you will also notice that I am cutting this one after the other. I didn't fold my fabric to cut this. My fabric is just one, and I was just placing the pattern on it, and I was just cutting like that. So I didn't fold any part of the fabric. So this place now is the back pattern. I will first cut out the right side of the back pattern. Remember to add your allowance. And then you will also remember that the back part, we have not added any zip allowance. So it's at this point now that you are cutting on your fabric that you will now go ahead to add zip allowance to it. So you just see that. So what I'm going to do is that at that place where I've already said we'll add zip allowance, I'll just add the amount of zip allowance that I want. What I added is about 1.5 inches, and I added it on that center back and also on the side back. So you can just see how I am adding it. So from here, I'm still going to add my 1 inch at the hemline and then 1/2 inch all round. So you can see the way I added the 1.5 inch. So you do it on the center parts, and then you also do it on the side parts, on the other side parts, which is the left side as well. So I'll just go ahead and then cut that out so that you see what we have. So I also went ahead to cut out my breast pad for my front. You can cut your breast pad however you like, or you can just achieve this shape that I have on my own. So my own breast pad started on my chest line, and remember that my chest line is 2 inches above my bust point, and then it stopped at the under bust, and this is what I had. I added my tissue stay. If you are making for a client and you want it to be strong, please use paper gum. For me, I did not use paper gum. I used air stay or tissue stay. So I also added it at the back as well. If you are making for your client, please use paper gum, don't use tissue stay. So at this point, we are now going to sew down our bust pad. Also remember to notch your fabrics as well. You can see the way I notched mine. So I'm just going to bring the underbust to the underbust, and then you stitch on the underbust first. After stitching on the underbust, you now stitch down to your hemline, and then you now come back again to now stitch to the up part. Don't start from your bottom to start joining. Whenever you are sewing a bustier, please remember to stitch on the underbust first so that you do not have any error at the end of the day. So after stitching, this is what I had. Then I will go ahead now to cut out the excess allowance. Also notice that I stitched up to the waist. I didn't stitch above the waist at the left side, which is going to have our asymmetric waistline or our design. And I also did the same thing on the lining as well. Also remember that when you are turning your lining, you have to make it to be contrasting, to be the other way with the fabric, so that you can be able to use it and turn the fabric, but you will still get to that in a while. So at this point, I am just going to go ahead and notch and then cut out the remaining excess that I have. Then I'll now take it to my ironing board, and then I am going to go ahead and give that a good press. So at this point, I have already ironed it down. You can see that our bustier is already coming out, and I also went ahead to iron down my seam allowance. You can see the way I did that. At this point, you can decide to use hairstay or tissue gum to just iron down to hold down the seam allowance, or you can just keep it, but whichever way we can work. I also top stitched on that waist part on the other side that is going to be open, just so that we have something strong there, and you can see what we have. So at this point, I also did the same thing on my lining, and you can see what I have. You can see that if I place my lining right side to my fabric, it is okay. So please make sure your lining is also, don't sew your lining to face exactly the same place your clothes is facing, because it is not going to rhyme. So you can see the way the lining of my back is now. I can't turn it, because if I place it the other way to turn it, that is what I'll have. So I just went ahead to stitch that and then sew it down the other way. So you can see that right side facing right side, the clothes is okay, and then I can now turn it. So please take note of this when you'll be sewing on your fabric. It is very important, or else you will turn your lining and you realize that the rough part of your lining is what is showing on the inside. So even if you make a mistake on that, please go ahead and then rectify it. So at this point, I'm just going to place the fabrics together just to make sure that we are on the right part, and you can see that the shape of our neckline is already coming out. So I am now going to go ahead and join the shoulders together, and then we can proceed from here. So I will join the shoulders of my fabric with 1/2 inch, and I will also do the same on my lining. Then I am going to go ahead and iron that out. So after joining my fabrics together, this is what I had. You can also see that I ironed it out, and you can see that I ironed the shoulder part flat. Then I'm also going to go ahead and do the same thing on the lining as well, and you can see what we have currently. So just make sure that whatever you do on your main fabric, you do it on your lining as well. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and pin my clothes to my fabric to my lining, right side facing right side. I will pin it across the front and then to the back. The reason why I am doing this is because I want to cut through on the shorter part of the front shoulder. You know that place that is the shorter part, I want to cut through it. This is because I want it to be separate, so that I can be able to join those lapel kind of stops, that black band across. So after pinning it, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it through. So at this point, I am just going to use my marker and then rule that out. So you see the way I am going to curve it. You know that slant from the other part of the shoulder, I'm just going to cut it out through. And remember that my lining and my fabric is together, so you can see the way I just cut that out, and this is now what we have. So both of them are now separate. The reason why I did this is so that I can be able to join it, because if I don't do it like this, I might not be able to turn all of them together, and because of those bands there, I won't be able to turn it just like that with the lining. So at this point, I am going to start from the zip allowance on the back part, and I'm going to measure through the longest part of the top. I am going to measure from the zip on the neckline of the back part to the of the front part, so that we can use it to cut out our band kind of, and what 31. So I am just going to go ahead and then bring my crepe and fold it in a triangular form, or should I say in a bias form. You know, when you want to fold a triangular flay kind of, that is how you are going to fold your band. Because if you cut out a straight band, it is going to have too many folds and you will not be able to take it out. It will now start developing errors. So at this point, I am just going to iron that down, and then I am going to now take my measurements and cut it out through. So you can see the way I folded this in a bias form or in a flay form. So I am just going to mark my starting line, and then from there I am now going to measure up to the part where I want my band to stop. I think I measured about 32 inches because what we had was 31. And then that 32, I just went ahead to divide it into 2, which was 16, so that I could have my center point. Then for the width of my band, I took up for it about 3 inches. But if you want your band to be really big, I think you should go up by 4 inches. And then on the side part, I came up by 1.5, even though I'm still going to trim this out later. So I'm just going to use my curved ruler to curve to each point, or should I say to each ending part, so you can just you can see what I'm doing. Then I'm just going to connect to the other part as well. So after this, I'm still going to go ahead to do the same thing on the other side of my fabric. Remember that one side my fabric is now 2, which is some part of the back and the front on one side, on the left side, and the back and the front joined through the shoulder on the other side as well. So this is for the longest part of my neck. Now that is what this 32 inches is. Then we are still going to do for the other side of the neck as well. So I now brought the other remaining side of my clothes, and I also took the neckline measurement. Sorry, my camera didn't capture that, but what I measured from the back to the front was about 17 inches. And then I went ahead to refold my fabric again in a triangular form so that we can be able to get that 17 inches as well. So I'll just go ahead and do the same thing, and then I will show you. So at this point, I am now going to pin down this band on my front part. You can see the way I am placing the band. So I am just going to take my pins and then pin it down across. You can see the way I am pinning it down. I will also go ahead and do the same for the back parts as well. I will go ahead. So after joining the back at first, I noticed that the tip of my band was too bold, so I loosed it, and then I'm just going to go ahead and trim some parts off. And what I had after trimming some parts off was about 1/4 inch, so that I'll have, if you notice, you see that the tip of that black band on that blouse is kind of small, it's not big kind of. So I just went ahead to do that amendment, and you can see what I have now. This is the bigger part of my blouse, and then this other side is the smaller part. So I'm just going to place it so that you have an idea of what we have currently. You can see that our blouse is already coming together. So guys, if you have watched up to this moment, please go ahead to like and hit the subscribe button, especially if this is your first time coming to my channel, so that you do not miss out on any video that we are going to upload. And are you enjoying this video? Please give us a like, a thumbs up. If you have any question, please remember to drop it in the comment section. I would also like to use this opportunity to say that our online class will be in January. So if you are interested, just send a WhatsApp message through the link on our bio in this YouTube. You can also join our WhatsApp community of tailor through the link on our bio as well, where you can get to ask questions and then get answers as well, and also to make your own contributions as well. All the links are in our bio. Just click the one that will take you directly to my DM to make inquiries for the online class. So at this point, I am going to go ahead then and stitch this smaller part of my blouse. So you can see the way I was just pinning it down just to make sure that everything is in place. And remember that my lining as well, I had to make sure that the lining was 1 inch shorter than the main fabric so that the lining doesn't pull through from the bottom. So I've already stitched it out, sorry. And this is what I had. So I just had to trim off the excess allowance, and then you notch and notch and notch so that when you turn your fabric, it is not going to have fold. You can just see me doing the notches and all of that. So please, if you have not liked this video, please go ahead now and give us a thumbs up. Now that you have done that, let's ride on. So after turning, this is what I had. I'm going to go ahead now and give this a good press. Then I will also advise you to top stitch on your lining before giving this a good press. You know that little allowance that is still remaining, just use it to top stitch it on your lining, just the way I am showing you with my finger as well. Then after you must have done that, just go ahead and give this a good press. So after ironing, this is what I had. You can see how beautiful this is, and you can see how flat and how relaxed it is. So please make sure to follow through the tiny processes as well. Then for the other side of my clothes, you can see what I have as well. You can see that everything is already taking shape. So what I'm going to do now is that I am now going to go back to still rejoin the smaller parts to the big parts. You remember when we did cut it through? So at this point, we are now going to join it back again. So while you are joining, make sure that the place that your armhole dart is also meeting together. Just make sure that the seam allowance is meeting together. And once I found that, I just placed it and then I pinned it down. You know that place where your armhole princess dart was joining, just make sure you still have the same thing. Then after stitching that down, this is what I had. And when you are stitching it down, please just take a very little something to use and hold it, because you remember that we didn't have any extra joining allowance there. So what I used to top stitch it currently is not even up to 1/4 of an inch, just to hold it down there. So after doing that, I now went ahead to pin that to my fabric, and then I'll now start placing the lining and then start pinning it so that we can use the line to turn it. I was just pinning and placing just to make sure that everything is on hold. And when you are pinning, remember that your lining has to be 1 inch shorter than your main fabric so that your lining doesn't push out when you are done sewing. So at this point, I was just pinning the down part. Sorry, my camera didn't capture that. And then I will sew the side allowance, the side seams. I'll just use about 1/4 of an inch, or should I say 1/2 inch, to join it. It was not up to 1/2 inch what I used to sew it down and all of that. So at this point, I was already almost done with my pinning, and I'm going to take it to my sewing machine now and stitch that together, and then I'm going to come back to show you what we have. So at this point, I was already done sewing, and you can see what I have. You can see the way I stitched every part together, from the side seam to the neckline to the hemline and everywhere. So I'm just going to go ahead now and cut out the excess seam that we have so that when I fold it, it won't have bulk. And after cutting that out, I'm just going to go ahead and notch. Please do not notch through your line, just do very little notch. You can just see the way I'm doing it very carefully so that I do not cut through my stitching line. And once I was done with that, I am now going to move ahead, and then we are going to sew the waist. You could that waist part that has like an asymmetric waistline is not yet closed. You will also notice that my seam allowance on this part is ironed open as well. So I'm just going to come up by 1/2 inch from the place where I stitch it to my waistline, and then I am now going to pin that together, and I am now going to sew just the way I am showing you with my finger. Even if you don't understand what I'm saying, just be looking at the clothes. So the main aim is just to cover that opening up. So I'm just going to use my pin and pin it down so that everything can be in place, and then I'm going to run like a rectangular stitch on it, and then run the other curved stitch on the other curved side of the blouse. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to my machine and sew that down so that you see what we have. Literally just stitch the main fabric to the lining. That's just it. So at this point I was already done stitching that. You can see I sewed it down to the curve, and I had to stitch it in a way to make sure that it is not open. So at this point I'm now going to notch that place. I'm going to make like a triangular notch, to one part of the stitch and then to the other side, so that when I fold it, it is not going to have fold there. So that is practically what I did at this point. And then I'm also going to go ahead and trim out any excess allowance that I think I am not going to need as well. So that is basically what I did now. So after doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it out from the armhole parts. You just have to keep turning and then use something that has like an edge I will just use a toothbrush to push out all the tips and the edges, just to make sure that every single thing that we turned is out. Then at that point I also noticed that band that I sewed it the other way, so please lift your own up while sewing, and I went ahead to give it a good press, and you can see how this is so beautiful. So this is what I had currently, and it was just so nice. This was after I finished ironing, and this is the front part. So you can see how nice it is. So guys, have you liked this video? Have you subscribed? Please go ahead now and subscribe and turn on your notification bell so that you know when I upload new tutorials as well. So at this point now, we are going to go ahead and then shape our blouse. So all you are going to do is just to measure what you have left and then take it out on the allowance. So for me, after taking down my body measurements, what I had left was about 1/2 inch. So I just used 1/2 inch to join it all through. So that was just what I was measuring. I just divided assuming my waist is 30, I divided by 2, which is 15, and then I measured the 15 ever I had. I just divided it into 2 as my allowance. So this is what I had. I'll just go ahead, give this a good press, and I also went ahead to attach my zip as well. Remember that we took out 1.5 inches out for the zip, so I just took that out and then I sewed down my zip. So at this point I've attached the zip. Then I am also going to go ahead to trim out the armhole a little bit, with just like about 1/2 inch. Then on this part where the band is, we are going to go ahead and deband a little bit so that we can be able to sew down our lace on it, because currently our band is stitched to it. So I just went ahead to cut out some parts, like open up the band to that place where the armhole connected to the other side. I believe you can understand what I'm doing, or you are seeing what I'm doing. So just for our chantilly hand to be able to go very well, that is just what I'm. So I altered the band, or I loosed the band up to the place where the chantilly lace is going to make a very nice curve on the armhole, kind of. So at this point I am just going to cut out my sleeve. So you can even decide to do any sleeve that you want. It mustn't be the sleeve that they already did here. So you can just decide to do any sleeve design of your choice. You can decide to do the one that has a flare hand, or whichever thing that you want. So for my sleeve at this point, I just gave it a kind of a triangular curve, so that to have like a triangular hemline kind of. and then I went ahead to cut that out as well. So, and from here I am now going to proceed to join my sleeve. So just stay tuned so that you see how I was able to maneuver that part where I opened my band as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you what that is. So all you need to do is just to place the band to be lapping on the fabric, and then you now place the lace on and you stitch on top of it. Hope you were able to understand that. Place the band on top of the main fabric and then place the lace on top of it. So after stitching, this is what I had, and from here you can now go ahead to interlock it or with a black thread, and this is what I had finally. So our next tutorial is going to be on the skirt part, and we are going to cover how to attach a hip form to that skirt. I'll be attaching a hip form to it, and then we are going to use it as a skirt part of this blouse. You know, we already did a tutorial on hip padding, but that one was with a pattern drafting. But this particular hip padding that we are going to do now is going to be like a freehand method kind of. So I can't wait to see you in that class. Also check out other videos that we have on the channel. You will also learn a lot from that. So guys, it was happy to have you here. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, it's still your girl Tekla, and see you in my next tutorial. Bye.